I was stunned when I received yet another notice from the Homeowners Association, HOA, but this one stood out. My monthly fees had nearly doubled overnight. Clutching the letter, I marched to the community office, determined to get answers. What is the meaning of this? I demanded. My fees have doubled without warning. Behind the desk sat Linda, her hair impeccably styled, exuding an air of unshakable authority. She barely glanced up from her screen. We've observed that your property has become notably profitable recently. The board has decided that successful homeowners should contribute more to community maintenance. Since when does financial success justify raising HOA fees? I countered. That's not in any bylaw I've agreed to. Linda's response was cool and rehearsed. The bylaws grant us discretion to adjust fees as needed. Your property is generating significant income, and it's only fair you pay more. I inhaled deeply, masking my growing frustration. If only she knew who she was dealing with. I'd like to see documentation justifying this decision, I said evenly. It's all perfectly legal, she assured me, her tone dismissive. The board voted unanimously. A board she dominated, from what I'd heard. I'll look forward to the next meeting, then, I replied, a strategy already taking shape as I left. Linda had no idea that I owned not only my home, but also the apartment building where she resided, a fact that would soon turn her power play against her. This wasn't Linda's first attempt to complicate my life. For 3 years, I'd endured her overbearing control citations for grass slightly too long, fines for guests parking overnight, warnings about decorations she deemed unfit for the community. I'd bought my home as an investment years ago, along with several other properties, including a small apartment complex nearby. Back then, the HOA was reasonable, focused on upholding property values and shared spaces. But when Linda arrived, she swiftly climbed to the presidency, turning the HOA into her personal domain. Rules were enforced arbitrarily, favoring her allies and punishing dissenters. My property's profitability had indeed risen recently. I'd renovated the basement into a rental unit, securing all necessary permits. The income supported upgrades to my other holdings, including the apartment complex where Linda had lived for 2 years. Reviewing my portfolio last month, I'd noticed her name among the tenants, but hadn't connected it to our HOA disputes. I managed the apartments through an LLC, keeping my homeowner and landlord roles separate. Making too much money, she'd said. The irony was staggering. She lived comfortably in one of my best units while penalizing me for my success. This fee hike wasn't about community needs. It was personal retaliation for refusing to bend to her will. That evening, I dove into HOA regulations and bylaws. The fee increase fell within their authority but required proper justification and records, neither of which Linda had proved why dead. Only vague mentions of discretionary adjustments. The next day, I requested minutes from board meetings discussing my property. Linda stalled, claiming the records weren't readily available. I pressed on, citing state laws mandating HOA transparency. Meanwhile, I contacted my property management company for Linda's tenant file. Her lease was up for renewal in 2 months, perfect timing. She'd been a reliable tenant, though occasionally demanding about minor repairs. I also reached out to neighbors, casually probing their HOA experiences. Many echoed my frustrations: arbitrary enforcement, sudden fee hikes, and a lack of openness. Most, however, feared Linda's wrath. She fined the Thompsons due law $500 for a fence in the wrong shade, one said. The Clarks had to rip out their garden because she called it an eyesore. I documented everything, building a case against her leadership. Reviewing the HOA's finances revealed a surplus. Why raise fees with extra funds? Then I spotted budget lines for administrative compensation that appeared only after Linda's tenure began. She wasn't just power-hungry. She was profiting. This was my leverage. As her landlord and a homeowner, I could expose her misconduct. I requested a private meeting to address the fee increase. Linda agreed, likely expecting to intimidate me as she had others. We met in the community center, a modest room overlooking the pool. She arrived punctually, portfolio in hand, radiating confidence. I've reviewed the bylaws, I began. The board can adjust fees, but it requires documented justification. She sighed, feigning patience. As I've said, your property's profitability justifies it. The board agrees. The board are you? I pressed. Her eyes narrowed. The board votes on all matters. A board that rubber stamps your decisions, I replied. Let's be frank, Linda. Her posture stiffened. I don't appreciate your tone. If you can't afford the fees, my finances aren't the issue, I interrupted. I can pay easily. It's the principle and precedent that concern me. Principles don't maintain property values, she snapped. If money's such a worry, maybe this community isn't for you. I smiled, and she hesitated. Actually, Linda, I've been thinking about who belongs where. For example, I've reviewed tenants at my building on Maple Street. Apartment 3B, specifically. Her face paled as the realization hit. That's right, I am your landlord. The lease with Highland Properties? My company. The too much money. You're punishing me for keeps your home running. Linda stammered. This is inappropriate. You can't use your landlord status to sway HOA matters. Interesting stance, I said. But you're fine using your HOA role to target me financially. Where's the line, Linda? She grabbed her portfolio, hands trembling. This meeting's over. I'll consult our attorney about this conflict. Please do, I replied. And explain how you justified raising only my fees based on my success, not community needs. I'm sure that'll interest them. After she left, I reviewed her lease terms with my property manager. I drafted a new version rent unchanged, but with new clauses, strict noise rules with hefty fines, quarterly inspections, and a community contribution fee matching her HOA increase. I also confirmed that targeting one homeowner for fees based on profitability violated state HOA laws. I compiled a legal brief with citations. When Linda received her renewal packet, I included a note. I value fairness and transparency in my dealings, unlike some HOA leaders. She called within an hour, furious. These terms are outrageous. They're reasonable adjustments based on market conditions and my portfolio's profitability, I said. Familiar logic, right? This is retaliation, she snapped. No, Linda, it's business just like your fee hike was business. I'm exercising my rights as a property owner, as you've shown is acceptable. She threatened to move, but I noted the tight rental market units in her range were scarce, and she'd likely pay more elsewhere. What do you want? She finally asked, subdued. Fairness, transparency, an HOA that serves the community, not one person's ego. Rescind my fee increase, reform enforcement, and open the books. And if I don't, enjoy apartment hunting. I hear the complex across town is nice outside HOA reach, so you'd have no control there. Linda fought back, issuing me 3 fabricated violations: yard issues, unauthorized modifications, and nuisance from delivery traffic. My property was pristine, and I documented its compliance with photos. I met Michael Patel, a board member uneasy with Linda's tactics, for coffee. These violations are false, I said, showing evidence, and I suspect she's abusing her role. Michael sighed. You're not the first she's targeted, but she dominates meetings. What if you had proof of financial misconduct? I showed him the budget discrepancies or compensation, questionable vendor deals, selective enforcement. She'll deny it and steamroll us, he said. Not if homeowners attend the next meeting, if board members ask pointed questions, if it's recorded, I replied. He hesitated. She'll make our lives miserable. She already is. How long will you let her? I organized discreetly, creating a private group for homeowners to share stories of Linda's overreach. The response was overwhelming: fines, inconsistent rules, retaliation. Linda escalated, issuing more notices and scheduling a meeting I couldn't attend. She even challenged my renovation permits with the city, all baseless. I recorded every interaction, building a case for harassment. The night before the HOA meeting, she left a voicemail. This war you've started, you can't win. I've run this community for years. Sign the paperwork, or it'll get worse. It was the evidence I needed. The meeting room was packed, word had spread. Linda sat at the head, flanked by tense board members. Let's begin with routine matters, she said, banging her gavel. Point of order, I interjected. We should address the arbitrary, potentially illegal fee and fine assessments. Her face reddened. That's not on the agenda. Sit down. Michael spoke up. As a board member, I moved to amend the agenda. Susan Shin seconded. 3 hands rosy, a majority. Linda relented. 5 minutes. I'll need more, I said, projecting HOA finances. Fees rose 40 fan tram under Linda's leadership, yet SARE VYCS declined. Surplus funds went to administrative expenses that didn't exist before. I showed fine disparities: dissenters targeted, allies spared. This is slander, Linda shouted. I played an assessor's recording proving my compliance, then cited bylaws and state laws banning targeted fee hikes. Her voicemail sealed the threats echoing through the room. Susan moved for an audit and Linda's suspension. The vote was unanimous. She stormed out, vowing lawsuits. Before you do, I said, remember I have more evidence and I'm still your landlord. The audit exposed years of Linda skimming funds. She was removed, her misconduct reported. She didn't renew her lease, moving to an HOA-free condo across town. Michael's new board brought transparent fair fees, a review committee, open meetings. My rental unit set a precedent for balanced renovation rules. Driving past her old building, I reflect on power, accountability, and information's value. Linda's ignorance of who I was her downfall. My preparation turned her attack into a community Tory. Now, neighbors connect, cooperation thrives, and I've grown my portfolio, confident in an HOA rooted in integrity. Sometimes, the best investment is standing for what's right.